Hello, everybody, and thank you for turning out today for this webinar. I'm Randy Horton, Chief Solutions Officer at Orthogonal. We are really excited for today's topic and for the speakers we've got lined up. I also want to thank you for coming out, which may be the very last spot that you could reasonably hold a webinar in 2022 before people start heading out on winter vacation. So we got this one just in under the line. All this year, we've been doing a series of webinars under the moniker of Move Faster and Break Nothing, which really looks at this question that's core to us at Orthogonal, which is how do we fuse the best of software engineering and product management methods and tooling with the need in medical device software for safety and effectiveness so that we know the devices perform properly in a way that we can accelerate the development of better and newer medical devices and improve patient outcomes faster, while still being very confident that we are properly handling devices that both are very powerful and entail a lot of risk. And a lot of what we focused on in this series is basically looking at a number of different methods and techniques and tooling that are commonly used in other industries in modern software development, but may not have seen as much traction in our space in MedTech, because people are obviously very cautious about bringing things in and looking at how do we fuse these worlds. So it's sort of fitting that we're going to have our last topic today, which is looking at three classes of tools that we use in smartphone application development around software as a medical device. These are not unique to us. These are broadly used across the industry. Many of you may have used them, but in general, what we've observed, there's definitely a lot more room for adoption in our industry, and also for more mature adoption and people getting more and more sophisticated in how they do it. And we think that these three tools, even though they're each a little bit different, all kind of fall into this class of how can we leverage all the amazing things going on in the world of software and piggyback on those economies of scale to improve what we're doing in medical device software. We're going to try and keep this very fast-paced and lively and not drone on. So we've got a combination of sort of couch interviews and lightning talks and a Q&A at the end for everybody. We're going to kind of run through a general introduction and overview of this space and the topic. We're going to drill in on each of the three tool sets, and then we'll come back together for questions. So please do keep the questions going. We will probably field all of them towards the end, but if they fit in and we can get them in during, that's fine. But the reason we're going to hold them is actually we've promised you all we are going to, in 50 minutes, cover the core content here. And we really want to blow through that and get you kind of this overview and this high level introduction to these three classes of tools right away. But we will stick on another 40 minutes. So we will be here up to 90 minutes, 1:30 Eastern, if people have questions that go that long, and frequently they do. So we're really happy to keep answering questions. Also, if we find that we get questions that are really, really technical and almost too specific, we can find a way to ask our speakers to come back another time or address some of those offline. So please do keep them coming for the total of this. We'll introduce kind of each speaker as we get going. To kick off, I'm pleased to interview two of the smartest people I know in technology, my colleague Brett Stewart, who's a principal solutions architect at Orthogonal and just has tremendous experience in MedTech as well as other industries, developing all kinds of fantastic applications. And an old colleague of mine from my prior life, Jake Radkowitz, who's now SVP of ShipBob, which is a company that's doing really great things, basically helping independent e-commerce vendors get Amazon-grade logistics without having to actually go through Amazon and paying one of their competitors for the logistics. And the truth is, the fact that Jake's able to join us here on December 14th is a testament to the investment that his firm has put into some of these tools in the last year to make sure that he knew on December 14th things would be calm enough. I do like to joke that in MedTech, we deal with what the federal government classifies as critical infrastructure. And I don't know that the federal government classifies e-commerce fulfillment as critical infrastructure, but I'm pretty sure that every parent and child in this country waiting on a Christmas gift or a holiday gift to arrive, a toy, absolutely classifies as critical infrastructure. So I think we have a lot we can benefit from the market pressures on Jake to provide things that are reliable and work as intended in a way that we are regulated to do so. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brett and Jake for an overview.
Hey, thanks, Randy. So Jake, I think the big focus of this particular webinar, it's going to be operational support for software as a medical device. We have three really great companies here, with yourself showing us how you experience some of these issues or companies and how you use these tools for operations. And so the class we're going to cover are, software security with mobile devices. We're going to cover some crash analytics and then product analytics. So first of all, tell me give a little bit of background on how you employ these tools, just an overview for your business and why they're critical.
Yeah. So like Randy said, we're an e-commerce fulfillment company. I like to think of us as the Stripe for e-commerce, because it's very much behind the scenes. But we have literally hundreds of fulfillment centers all over the world right now. And as we speak, they're currently using thousands of iOS devices with our application built into it, to pick and pack and ship all of the products that we're shipping out for our merchants. So making sure that those are operating securely and they're not crashing, and we're understanding those user flows is huge.
Excellent. So yeah, I mean, it's once you're on the other side of development, yay, we finished development, yay, it's in the market. Now what? No one wants the old adage, getting woken up at 2 a.m. in the morning for calls. You want to prevent those, and you want your customers to be happy and have a great experience with your app, or in the case of software as a medical device, you want their experience to enrich their lives or help them, with their conditions. So much appreciated. So Randy, I think, we'd like to talk about mobile security at this point, and turn it over to you to introduce our, GuardSquare.
Thank you. All right. So next up is Anton from GuardSquare. GuardSquare is a firm that a mobile security firm that we've collaborated with extensively over the last couple of years. We find their perspective on the marketplace is good. I'll be candid, this is not a formal endorsement of their tools. This is not that kind of thing, but we asked them to come here and share what is this class of tools intended to do, and what is the value of these tools, or frankly, why would you be crazy not to be using these kinds of tools in this day and age? So we're gonna pull up the deck for this. I don't see the slides yet, and we'll turn it over to Anton.
So yeah, we will start with protecting your mobile application and all the hows and whys. I'm Anton Baranenko, product manager at GuardSquare. So let's get started with the first topic. Yeah, so first is the why part. Mobile application tampering, yeah, eventually constitutes a real-world patient risk. It applies to both software as medical devices, but it also applies to mobile applications which accompany a medical device, such as accompanying a hardware wearable, for example. So all kinds of medical software can be tampered with, and this can result into a real impact on the patient. So a little bit on the tampering, which in the medical world has a long history. Tampering can be done with malicious intent. There are plenty of examples of cases where medical device tampering was done in order to harm a group of patients or a specific patient. What's interesting is that sometimes it can be done even with good intent as well. For example, we are aware of a medical device company who had a risk of their device communication protocol being reverse engineered in order to add extra or third-party functionality to the application. And patients sometimes don't know what they are doing, and they are trusting their own manufacturer in order to add those nice-to-use extras, which in the end result into the patient harm. So when we are talking about this impact on the patient, the first question that we can ask ourselves is what kind of impact to expect. And medical mobile applications and health applications interact with a lot of actors and stakeholders and components. They interact with people, with medical professionals, so sending information to doctors. They interact with patients by displaying the information and collecting diagnostics data, with different kinds of wearable medical device, hardware monitors, and so on, and also devices that deliver treatment as well. So all the related data and functionality is in fact threatened by application tampering. So let's move on. Talking about the risks. Usually, medical device regulations such as FDA regulations or EU MDR or other country regulations prescribe you to do product risk management. And application tampering is no exception to that. So you also have to do your risk management when it comes to tampering risks. So here on this slide, we have a few examples of failure modes and risks and associated patient harms that can come from the application tampering. And you can use different methodologies to do so. For example, STRIDE, which is recommended in the FDA playbook for threat modeling. Here we come already to the first tool. This is mobile application security scanning. This is a tool that enables you to continuously verify and check if the security risks are applicable and technically addressed for your application. But we are going to talk about how to solve a bit later. What's interesting about tampering, when you're planning your risk for your medical device or for your medical application, is that thinking about the risk of tampering is not that easy because the probability of such risk is difficult to estimate. And this partially is because there is no statistics, good trustworthy statistics available to the market. It's also difficult to predict. So it's a little bit of like a black swan, being a target for a tampering attack. But also there is another reason that such risks and such cases are sometimes silenced and they don't reach the wider audience. So you cannot really leverage even the statistics that you already have. For example, just recently, many security professionals learned about multiple security breaches that were withheld from public by a major social media corporation. There are numerous cases where, which prove that such risks are difficult to estimate. And the regulations actually recognize that too. So the ISO 14971 literally acknowledges that the tampering is a risk whose probability is very difficult to estimate. And based on that, it's usually necessary to evaluate the risk on basis of the nature of the harm. So things that we saw on the previous slide, and then based on the previous worst case estimation of probability. Okay, that was a long part discussing the why aspect of this. Now, what is the how, right? What we propose, and what we as Guard Square do and recommend all device manufacturers to do as well, is to adopt application protection at all stages of the SDLC. And that when speaking about practical execution of an application tampering attack, you will want your application to be protected against all stages, right? During the initial stages of the attack, it comes down to observation, to reverse engineering of the application. Then it's actually executing the attack and distributing it. So through all the stages, you will want your application to be protected. The important part as well And the key to that is that you protect your application at every stage of your SDLC. So security is not something that you hastily slap on top. At the end of your life cycle, just add security, run a magical tool that's going to protect your application. No, this is not what it is. Instead, you plan, you implement, and you continuously verify, and you continuously improve your application protection. And tools such as GuardSquare can help you to do that at every stage again of the SDLC, starting with building your application, but also at the testing stage. You want to get continuously the feedback, but even after you release, you will also want to get continuously feedback from the market in order to continuously improve your protection. So how this practically looks is that you have a set of automated tools that are going to keep your application well protected against this type of risks. And then in your risk management charter, it becomes the easy part. You basically can focus on other risks in your RMC, which are more applicable to the nature of the application itself, while keeping tampering risks under control, well mitigated, and compatible with the regulations. So that's probably a lot. We promised to keep the webinar fast-paced. So at this point, I will leave you to process and digest this information. At the end of the webinar, we are going to have a Q&A session. So please submit your questions now, and then I can review them later and answer them at the end of the webinar. Thanks.
One of the applicable areas that you might not have considered for application security, but comes up often is for software and medical devices, companies that are looking to create an SDK for third-party use, where you either have an algorithm or some functionality that you want to share with partners, especially on the advent of a lot of telemedicine applications. So ensuring that your SDK also carries that same protection and security, and then it's secure not only from the standpoint of protecting your users, but also protecting your IP as you share that with your partners is a applicable area here. So something to think about operationally.
Yeah, that's indeed the case. So this is maybe especially applicable to SDKs as they get integrated into different applications. It's keeping the IP protected and the core functionality protected from tampering is especially important. Yeah, completely agree with you.
We're actually a couple minutes ahead, so I'll ask one question I see here. Is there a role for white hat penetration attack testing?
Yes, there is certainly a role for white hat penetration attack testing, and this is so those automation tools, they are going to help you to establish baseline protection for specific group of risks, right? Specifically for reverse engineering and tampering. But first, they have to be applied in the correct way. And second, there could be many other vulnerabilities which go beyond this group of risks as well. So I would say that for a medical device, this is an absolutely mandatory practice to do. But something to keep in mind is that penetration testing, which is done manually, delivers you a high quality result, but it requires time to perform. So the feedback loop is rather long. And this is why you will want to keep both of them, to keep the feedback loop short and eliminate most of the risks automatically and address them as you are developing your application. And at certain points in time, you perform the penetration testing manually. That is the best practice that we recommend.
Close the feedback loop, learn fast, fail fast, or as we say in Chicago, vote early and often. Excellent. And a couple of people had asked, yes, we will be posting the slides afterwards. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Anton. With that, we're actually going to jump back to Brett and Jake to talk about crash analytics, which is something that I gather has occupied a significant portion Jake's year and not an insignificant amount of budget over the last year. So I'll let the two of you take it from there.
So Jake, yeah, so let's talk about crash analytics. What is it used for? Just sort of an overview, and how do you employ it at ShipUp?
So for crash analytics, essentially when your application hits some unforeseen challenge and decides to die, this is a suite of tools that basically collects the data around what was going on when that application crashed. So we've used this extensively over the last several years at ShipUp to kind of diagnose those unforeseen issues.
And so what sorts of things are you most attuned to? What are the first metrics you look at, and what has risen to the top of your top two things to look at when reviewing crash analytics?
Oh my, I wish it was just a top two. I think every error that you run into kind of has its own unique personality and behaviors that kind of led to it. Sometimes it's something as simple as, somebody rage clicking on a button because they're frustrated with the application. And you can start to diagnose some of that with some of the things we'll talk about later with product analytics. And sometimes it's as complicated as, too many threads, or, thread exhaustion, or, something that was just totally unforeseen in the making of the application.
So I know we didn't prepare. I have some questions prepared for you. I want to sort of go off that script a little bit and start talking about more of assurance. How do you sort of employ crash analytics in your overall effort to ensure continuity and high availability for your users?
Yeah, so that continuity and high availability is super important because the orders never stop coming in, and they always have to be going out, right? Otherwise you wind up in a really bad situation. So the crash analytics is a super important tool to figure out where those kind of edge cases are and what's causing them, so you can go in and review what's actually happening at the time of the crash. We've used them in our mobile apps, and we've got desktop apps, and even back-end servers to help figure out where what's going on at that time. What were the characteristics of the device when it crashed, and what else was going on, because I think that's pretty important.
And what role do they play in preventative operations?
Yeah, every now and then when you find something, you realize it maybe wasn't as much of an edge case, right? And it could happen a lot more. And actually, when we really started employing, using crash analytics to diagnose some of these things, that's when we got significantly better at preventing them in the future.
Yeah, great. So what is the suite of tools, or any that you would, I don't know if we're endorsing tools here, but what suite of tools do you usually use? Because there's the collection, there's dashboards for viewing, there's other like sort of traceability and insights that can be gleaned from these tools. Are there any go-tos that in your toolkit?
Yeah, so we're primarily a Microsoft shop. So we started using the crash analytics inside of Microsoft Azure really heavily. And it was the one great thing about it is that it is super detailed. The not so great thing is it's actually fairly difficult to use. So it took us a little while to learn how to use them effectively and really capture those dumps of data. And then as you're sorting through those, as you're sorting through that dumps of data, you realize, oh my gosh, there's a lot more here. Especially if it's something that that is a fairly common event. There's a lot more here. There's a lot more patterns to look at than you first realized. So then you can get into different tools that gather up that data and start to help identify those patterns.
Thank you. Thank you. When you are sort of identifying these patterns, this assumes that, you've been notified of some issue, either, by your dev team or your operations team, or a ticket's come in, right? This is sort of like an elevated case of customer service or incident management. How do you sort of employ, or is there some traceability through that system where you have like a service desk that talks about a problem, and then that problem gets, added to your, issue tracker, and then the crash analytics get added to the issue? Is there some traceability there so that, for software as a medical device, you have to sort of track that incident and handle it and improve that it's resolved? So what are your what's your toolkit or processes for those?
Yeah. So in the past, it was very manual, right? Jira ticketing system, and we'd get a report of something going wrong, or even sometimes just like a Slack message from somebody on the ground using the app. And we would kind of jump into action, try and diagnose, use some of those big crash data dumps to figure out what was going on. Recently, I'd say within the last year or two here, we've really transitioned into much more of a proactive approach. So once we use some of those crash analytics tools, we realized there were certain scenarios that we had to account for that weren't super easy. So great example is like a scaling is some service. Sometimes they're not scaling fast enough to keep up with whatever demand is being placed on the service, and then you can run into some crash scenarios there. So what we use that crash analytics data for was to really help us figure out, how do we alert for these things that we can't fix right off the bat, or that maybe are much longer term fixes than just a simple restarting of the service or something, that clearing a cache or whatever. And then you could start to get ahead of those, so that there's a much, so that you've got that lead time, and you can start alerting and diagnosing on those issues early before they cause the crashes. So that's kind of the whole point. It's kind of a funny, way to think about it, but the whole point of crash analytics is to help you not crash anymore. So
exactly. So, close those, incidents and, pare them down as much as possible. So, well, thank you.
No, thank you.
Great. I will throw in, we have 30 seconds. I'll throw in one question, Jake. I don't know if you're going to, this one's in your wheelhouse or not, but basically somebody asked about, do you worry about basically identifiable information or privacy information being scooped up in the crash analytics? In our case, it's personally identifiable information or health information, but do you worry about essentially getting stuff scooped up and making a copy of things that you wouldn't want somewhere else?
I think if you're in technology, you should be worried about that regardless of what industry you're in. Nobody wants to be the guy on CNN, explaining why all this user data got exposed. So I think regardless of that, yeah, you've got to be worried about it. So we definitely are. We've invested some major time and effort to make sure that that crash analytics data is less vulnerable to scooping up that PII data for sure.
So basically, there's no magic ticket. It's being aware of the issue and following the data is essentially the solution.
Yeah, and I think that's an issue. You're never done with it, right? So you really have to. You're never done with it unless your application and everything else in your whole ecosystem never changes, right? And part of the reason, tech professionals have jobs is because these things are always changing. So just, similar to crash analytics or the mobile app security, you really have to continue monitoring those because everything is changing, right? You're developing new features. The hardware you're operating on changes all the time. You have to assume that there's other contenders in that space. So all of that needs to be kind of continually monitored.
Got it. Thank you. Well, thank you for your time. And also we want to congratulate you on the press release that Santa's Workshop just announced that Ship Bob is a platinum level partner of Santa Claus this year. Big achievement. So we that was in jest for anybody who's wondering. All right, terrific. Next up is Matt Finch from Mixpanel, which is a product analytics firm we've collaborated with extensively, both on projects and on thought leadership, and it's an area we're pretty bullish on. It's I think to some extent a different kind of tool, to pull into medical device, although an equally useful one. So Matt, with that, we'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. Thanks everybody for joining us today, and appreciate Randy and team for having us on. So, the session that we're going to talk about here is more about like in-app user behavior and how do our end users interact with the technology that we build for them. So if we jump to the next slide, please. If we think about our team of either designers, product leaders, product managers, people that are coming up with the design for our application, every single time we make a decision, we've probably got 100 questions that go behind that design decision. Should we make investments in particular use cases, or, in my example here, in terms of operating system or the type of app infrastructure that we have? Should we build one feature versus another? You've got a limited number of choices to make, a limited number of resources to put behind certain features. How do you know and understand which one should be a priority over another? Things like localization, and also being more specific to, the device industry, thinking about, well, how does a user interact with an alert? If something happens on the device, that surfaces in the application. How do they interact with it? What kind of options should we give to them? And how do we surface that to make sure that if they see a really important alert, or they need to get a really important alert about something, how is that presented to them in a way that really drives action versus being hidden away in some menu somewhere? So those are the types of things that we can help you with product and behavior analytics. So if we jump to the next slide. If we think about all of the data that is behind our application, there is so much to then sift through, and all of the different ways that people are navigating the application, what buttons they're clicking on, what loops they're going through. Do people get stuck in loops and can't get the answer that they're looking for? And again, looking at the decisions that we have to make with the data that's in front of us. So what we really encourage, again, if we go to the next slide, please, is what we call our kind of product design flywheel. We go through this kind of loop of understanding, well, what is the question that I need an answer to? How do I explore the data behind that question? How do I get the answers to that question, and then go and build something that's meaningful? And then when I've built something that's meaningful, how do I know that it worked? How do I know that the choice that I made actually had the impact that I wanted it to have? And that's where we go through, to the learning section, and then re-question that decision that we made. So we often encourage using product analytics really at the heart, behavior analytics at the heart of this flywheel, really truly to understand the questions that we're asking, getting the answers to those questions, making product decisions based on the answers to those questions, and then going through that learning loop again. And the important thing for me, certainly when it comes to things like medical devices, and then the interaction that we have with those medical devices, is how do we make that experience really seamless for the user? There's a difference in importance, let's say, between a social media application and a medical device application. We absolutely need that experience to be as seamless as possible, to surface any information as quickly as possible, and really make it not difficult at all for the user of that application to get the information that they need. These applications and the devices that they're attached to are incredibly important things, sometimes life or death things, much more important than some of the other applications that we interact with on a daily basis. If my online banking app crashed or my social media app crashed, then hey, so what? I'll restart it, no problem, pick up where I left off. If that crash is something that has an impact on my health, that's way more important. So this user behavior analytics tying into the way that it interacts with the device, really, really important way of designing our products for the future, and frankly for the benefit of the folks using them. Please go to the final slide, please. Okay, and this is a really great quote that we love talking about here at Mixpanel, and really the quote is actually just those first three words. data represents truth. And if we think about the information that we have underlying our applications, all of this user behavior, the way that our users interact with our application, it's kind of no real way of gaming that. It's very black and white. If somebody is using, a group of users is using features versus not using features, they're struggling with something versus loving something, and we're getting that real-time feedback through our behavior analytics, that's what's really going to give us access to the truth, and real-time access to the truth as well. And in this case, Vince was able to make those fast decisions a lot faster. They were able to loop, ideate, test, measure, iterate that flywheel that we spoke about earlier on. And really the final quote there is, the faster we can close the loop, the better we can build our product. If we're spending 2, 3, 4 weeks researching something that we can present to somebody within a matter of a few minutes or an hour using our application, that makes a real impact. And think back again to those decisions that we have to make, the resources that we have to put towards building our applications. That speed of thought and that speed of iteration is really key to developing these applications better and more efficiently. We can do more with our designers, our developers, our engineers, if we're able to shorten that time frame. And that's it from me. Would love to take some questions.
That's terrific, Matt. Thank you. I also want to introduce at this time another member of the orthogonal team, Bob Mole, who leads experience design for us in human factors and has been a key implementer of product analytics. In fact, Bob was lead author on 2 papers that were recently published on how to apply product analytics in a medical device setting. And I think we'll just point out one quick thing, which is that absolutely product analytics can accelerate product development. There's 2 other general uses we talk about it in the medical device space, one of which is very germane to this webinar, which is essentially using it to do direct one-on-one support of users. If a user calls in a patient or a provider and says, I don't understand what's going on with my application, you can actually look in there and figure out what they actually clicked on and not what they think they clicked on, because sometimes there is a gap between those things. The other one is sort of it's product at the far end, which is as we get into the personalization of medicine and more sophisticated applications of artificial intelligence to personalize recommendations for medicine. This is a data input we could use to potentially customize recommendations or therapeutic treatments for patients based on that data. Now, there's plenty that's going to have to get worked through on a number of fronts, including a lot of regulatory burdens along the way, but it just seems like a logical next step, not just that product managers can employ this information to design and customize products, but that actually systems will be able to do it on their own in the future. So we had one question that came in here. Sorry, I have to push this down. Oh yeah, so this is a good general one. We get a lot. Actually, we hear this a lot. We are using Google Firebase Analytics for our app. Why not just use that instead of Mixpanel or some fancy schmancy tool?
Yeah, great question. And all of these tools have a place, and we would definitely encourage everybody to make the right choice for them in their application. I won't kind of give a true comparison here on the call, but I think it's important to evaluate the requirements you have for your analytics. From a Mixpanel perspective, we actually focus a lot on the simplicity and breadth of the analytics that we have. Google Firebase probably has a place as well, and I'd encourage you to evaluate both solutions. But we really focus on the depth of analytics and the ability to go really deep into that data across platforms. I know Google Firebase focuses more on the kind of iOS and Android app side versus other applications and technology across different platforms. So happy to dive deeper on that with some more of the Mixpanel team. But I would encourage everybody to take a look at the right product analytics for them. We all fit in the space very well. Sometimes we integrate and play well with each other too, because we do different things. So I'd encourage people to do that.
And I'll say is, a second of what Matt's saying, that's not just a vendor perspective. We actually, Bob and I have a slide we use when we talk about this that says, please, for the love of everything that's good, don't go roll your own tool. And you can try, a basic, website tracking thing like something from Google or a competitor, but they're not rich enough for what we can do these days. So that's our place. So with that, why don't we pull everybody back in? Everybody turn on there and we'll field some of these questions. Some of these questions are on specific tools, not surprisingly. So we'll alternate through, but everybody should feel free to, I think there's a lot of generalized points that come out of this that are relevant. So everybody please feel free to, and the panelists to jump in and give commentary as we go through these. So, all right, so here's one on crash analytics. Does Azure's crash analytics give you end-to-end observability traces? So I guess, Jake, maybe you could talk a little bit about what that would be and what the value is or not, and then, your experience with your specific tools.
Yeah, I would say yes, but it doesn't come for free out of the box, like ready to go. There's definitely some setup and configuration to use. So, and we've used it. We've used it within. It's actually an Electron app to do some of that kind of end-to-end tracing. But yeah, it's good. It's not perfect like anything else. And there's definitely some work to do to really leverage it.
So is this one of those things probably similar to, product analytics, that you want to begin with the end in mind in terms of what data you need to analyze to make sure you're going to actually be capturing it?
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Got a question. I think, Bob, you're the right person. What's the relationship between product analytics use and human factor studies that are required for software as a medical device?
That's a great question. We like to use both and have the benefits of both the qualitative data and the quantitative data, because the quantitative data can kind of clue you in as to where there might be an issue, but the qualitative data can give you more the whys and the specifics behind the issue. So we can use quantitative data to inform actual user interviews in a way that we could not have those informed without the quantitative data. So they both work nicely together.
Excellent. Thank you. Got a question for Anton here on mobile app security. And maybe if you could explain this question a little bit for people who don't understand all the terms in here. Does app attestation by itself provide reasonable protection against app tampering?
Yeah, so first, a bit of an explanation. What is app attestation? This is a technology that allows you to check whether the app that is running on the device is a genuine app, which is a part of a set of measures that you do in order to protect your application from tampering. So first, I will answer literally the question, and then I will give comments. So is it a reasonable protection against tampering risk? The answer is yes. Is it sufficient on its own? The answer is no. And the reason why it's not sufficient on its own, I will use an example of a very famous application attestation technology that delivers you the information about the checksum and sign-in certificates of the application that is running. That is actually, just technically speaking, this is not the only way to tamper with applications and libraries for that matter, because there is also a consideration of environment safety, like in which environment the application is running. Is the environment good? Yeah, or is there a debugging tool present and something like that? There are also multiple ways to modify the application's behavior without actually changing the application executable. Yeah, you can modify it in memory, for example, and then right in the memory of the device, you can hook different functions and make them behave differently without changing the application signature. So long story short, we do encourage everyone to use application attestation if it's applicable to your use case, that it is not enough on its own to prevent a tampering risk. So it has to be a set of measures that you implement. And if you have any further question, I guess I invite you to reach out to me, and then have a.
Your email is in the slides, so we can share it off. And also, they can find you on LinkedIn, I assume.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay, great. Couple questions that I'm going to roll up into a group and maybe kind of pose to each of you. So let's go in order. Let's do Anton, then Jake, and then Matt. That I think are sort of, I'd sum them up as, so what have we learned in 2022? What do you think we're going to be seeing in 2023 more generally in this space? What are the trends? What should we be aware of? So Anton.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, medical mobile applications will probably grow in the numbers. Yeah, and also in what the applications do for the patients, because patients expect faster treatment, but more importantly, it's patient-specific treatment and patient-specific, and diagnostics, and all the methods have to be adapted to the patients, and to their lifestyle, to their habits, to their specific health situation. And this is definitely going to impact the medical applications more and more. So in 2023, we are going to see medical applications which are more adaptive to patient needs, and making more use of mobile devices, of wearable devices, to deliver the treatment and to deliver the diagnostic data. So, and this means in turn that the risks of tampering, they will also grow because all those applications targeted at the individual patients, then they will have to collect data and they will have to process data specific to the patient, which is something that we as medical device software development must protect at all costs. This is our duty, to keep the patient safe. That's, I think, what we can expect in 23.
What about in terms of just application security risks and trends? Non-medical, what does everybody need to watch out for in 2020?
Well, the landscape for the security threats is changing more or less continuously. There is, honestly, I don't know what the attackers and reverse engineers are going to come up with exactly, but you can, for example, see that, if we are talking about consumer off-the-shelf mobile devices, you can see that there are new ways of jailbreaking iPhones that are appearing that we didn't hear before, the so-called rootless jailbreak, which is a different approach to doing that. It is difficult to predict of what exactly the attackers are going to do, but it's definitely easy to predict that the reaction time from the security vendors, that the application developers and the patients that they are going to expect, it's going to be shorter and shorter. So it's important to proactively prevent those threats, and it's important to react really fast to counter those threats, new things as they appear.
So you think that the end users in the marketplace are getting less and less tolerant of exposures or time to resolution?
It is about the expectations of the people, but it's also about the importance of the applications that are delivered to the people, right? So one thing is to, you have certain set of expectations for, I don't know, a dietary app or a fitness app, but as soon as this application starts to manage your health in a more substantial way, then logically your expectations grow as well, because this is about your health, this is about the health of your family, of your children, and so on. So it's very logical and very justified that the expectations of the customers will only grow.
So in application security, the only constants are change of threats and greater user expectations of quality of service. Excellent. Jake, what do you see, coming up in 2023?
Yeah. So a little side note on medical, device and apps and things like that. I think for, over the next several years, we'll see tons more of that. Just because there's, newer creative ways, as you and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, I was just thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I use a bunch of these and I don't even really think about, that there's this app component of it, which I think is really cool. So I think as we go into 2023 from a security perspective, totally agree. Like the threats are always changing, right? Always evolving. We have a large amount of effort that focuses on making sure just our applications are secure. And I think that's, even more so when it comes to when it comes to medical apps. The other thing I think is, especially for this industry, one thing to maybe think about more is that operational aspect. Because the expectations around the operation of these apps and these devices and things like that becomes more interactive. And as they become more interactive, the tolerance for things going wrong goes way down, right? It's not just a if it's not just a recording device, right? It's an interactive device. Then your expectation on the user side goes way up.
Great. Thank you for that. I think those are wise. It seems like it's interesting, just again, user expectations going up.
Yeah. Well, and I think I think that's one thing that you get to as well as your user base grows, right? When your user base is somewhat small, you've got a small footprint. You're like, oh, this is a very manageable problem. You can kind of respond to things more manually. You can monitor things more manually. You can do a lot of those, usability type issues a little more manually. But as that user base grows, your ability to manage that stuff gets much harder. And I think that's kind of where these tools come in.
Right. Thank you. Before we go on, there are some questions that have come in that are, as we expected, super specific, and I think very much of interest to the person who's asking them. They're good questions, but maybe not for everybody. So I'm going to invite the panelists for some of those. I think, Anton, you probably got most of them, to feel free to post responses directly, and you can share them to all. And also, again, encourage you all to reach out directly to the speakers afterwards. They are more than happy to discuss these things. All right, so Bob and Matt, what's up in 2023?
Should I go first, Bob?
Go ahead and go first, Matt.
Sure. So I was going to focus on, I think we touched a little bit on it already, but hyper personalization. And what I see trending already is the ability to take user specific data and make the experience very specific about that person. The other thing, kind of tying into that a little bit, is more of my opinion, thinking about AI, machine learning, some of that kind of stuff, right? That's a big trend we're seeing across all technology. I would caution the use of it. We think about this in a very specific way, that if you're looking for a very specific and true answer, you probably don't want to put it into a black box with some unknown algorithm that's going to spit out an opinion on the other side. And I'm making kind of a general assumption around machine learning and AI there. But I would definitely say it has a place in technology, but I would use a lot of caution, certainly when it comes to this technology in this world. We don't want guesses and the algorithm got it wrong, no worries. That can work in some instances, but if that's inside a medical device and an app, you probably don't want guesses. So that's something that I see approaching 2023 with caution as well. But really, my big thing that we see a lot of is hyper personalization, taking such specific levels of data around the individual, their experience, what they do, how they do it, and making their experience back in the app very specific to them.
Yeah, and one thing I would just add is we are seeing a trend in increased connectivity of the smartphone to the med device. So the intelligence that the phone can provide to what's going on the device, sometimes even controlling the device, is giving a much more intimate picture when you look at these quantitative tools as to how the person's interacting with the therapy. So this trend towards smartphone connectivity to device is only going to keep getting stronger and stronger, because the value add of the smartphone and the ability of the user to interface with their therapy using a smartphone has such tremendous value add that the beginnings of that are really just being started.
Excellent. Brett, as a principal solutions architect, you get to talk to a wide variety of people, see a wide variety of solutions. What would be your, Gestalt view on 2023?
Interesting you should ask that. So, I was catching up with a college friend recently, and he was asking, what I was doing And so I was telling them about software as a medical device. And a couple things sort of I kept repeating. Number one, we are converging on the tricorder. There are so many diagnostic tools out there, right? Eventually, you'll be able to diagnose all sorts of things using amazing sensors, whether it's light, sound, vibrations, whatever, right? Another one that's very interesting is behavioral therapy. There's these cognitive behavioral therapy apps, and they are really wonderful, looking at more than just the signals from the bodies, but looking at your, emotional wellness and solving some really difficult problems for people. And so I'm really excited about those two. And, I think Matt touched upon it, is that, and actually both Matt and Jake touched on it, is signal and recommendation, signal and response and interpretation of those signals using algorithms that, inform the user about trends or about how the data is applicable to them in their environment and in their lives to help them move forward. So those are the things that I see as trends and are personally just very exciting for me.
Excellent. Thank you. There's a question here. I think is a great question. I'll acknowledge up front. It's a loaded question to ask vendors, but I think it's a good one. And you all, I think, are capable of stepping out of your shoes directly and giving an answer. But how do you find a quality vendor in your space? What are the things you would look for if you're kicking the tires on vendors? And that could be either specific functionality and or just how do you assess vendor quality in general, particularly when it comes to sort of operations and mobile? Let's go in reverse. Let's start with Matt and we'll go back then through Jake.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Take my biased mixed panel hat off for a second. It's a great question because we're faced with that as vendors ourselves. We go and acquire technology to help us do what we do. I look for a couple of things. First of all is I'm a big believer in best of breed, where I think you should have a deep specialism in a particular area versus a broad, flatter suite of products. The other thing that I would look for is community. And I think when it comes to getting the support that you need from the business, I'm sure, in a lot of instances, and, we focus a lot on not doing this, is like you get a lot of support when you're buying from a vendor and then you don't get much once you've bought, and it's like, okay, good luck, over to you. We in Mixed Panel have specific teams to make sure we don't do that. So I would look for not just levels of great support when you're in the purchasing process, but levels of great support when you're implementing, going live, a community to support you, a user group of people that have gone through the same thing that you've been through, so you can ask those real questions about how to get something done. So that's a big thing for me. Community, post-sale support is definitely something that I would really look for as a quality vendor that's really focusing on getting customers successful versus just getting customers to purchase.
Okay. Jake, you're the buyer in the room, so.
Well, the buyer and the seller too. I'm not actually too much different from Ed's other guys here. But yeah, I think when I'm looking at vendors, I think there's a couple of things. There's a couple of different types that you're looking for sometimes. Sometimes you're just looking for fast and cheap, right? You want whatever it is to get, so you're just looking for give me a reasonable price on it. But as I think the relationship gets more kind of close to your primary business, you really have to look for that partnership. So I've got a great example of a vendor that we picked, I don't know, about a year and a half ago. There wasn't a lot of competitors in the space. This tool looked like it was the best tool, and it's also a fairly complex tool. So we were having trouble implementing and really using it the right way. And we wound up actually dumping that tool because we went to the vendor for help and support, and they were like, yeah, we don't really do that. you have to kind of know what the tool is. So we wound up switching to probably a less a tool with fewer features, but they were able to help us do that education part to help us learn how to use it better, which was huge. So it's not always, to your point, it's not always the feature set or the price. Sometimes it's how do I, I'm going to this vendor for a specialty, and if I'm looking for that specialty, I'm always looking for help potentially on how to use it.
So at the end of the day, you may be licensing a product, but you're buying a solution, which is a service.
Yep.
It's not a widget.
Yep.
All right. All right. Tell that to the VCs who are selling on ultimate scalability. So, although the truth is, that's why we've seen the rise of customer success as its own discipline.
Yeah.
To handle that. All right. And Anton.
Yeah, so first maybe about what not to do and how not to pick your vendor. It's for security. So what you don't want to do is send a big questionnaire of 1,000 questions and then try to devise like a mechanical system to rate your vendors and then collect like thousands of responses to your questionnaires and see like who has got like 500 points and who has got like 505 points. That's not the way to go. For security vendors specifically, I think you will want to look for the following things. Yeah, 3 factors. First is the security outcome, because that's ultimately why you reach out for a security vendor in the first place, right? So you will need to see that the reputation of the vendor on the market is corresponding to the results that you expect. Also perform assessment of what you actually need versus what you get, because in the end, if you don't get the outcome, why bother in the first place? The second part for security vendor, especially now in 2023, is going to be SDLC presence, and agility of the whole solution. So I think the days where you would assess the security for a year and then like write a design project, and then like think of different measures, and then in 3 years you get a solution for the application which is already outdated, it's not working anymore. And so instead you will want to be agile and you want to react on different security issues, and you will want to fix them on time, rather than trying to implement all the solution and to like design all the solution from the very beginning in a waterfall fashion. And what does it require is that the security is present at every stage of the DLC, starting with requirement and ending with post-market surveillance. And the third one, I agree with you, Matt, that quality of the post-sale support is very important. The collaboration that you have with your vendor during all the stages of the product adoption and execution and implementation is extremely important. So that's something definitely to look for in your vendor.
Great. Thank you. So there are a number of questions that came in that are much more specific to regulation of medical devices and software as a medical device specifically. To be candid, this is not the group we convened to address that. Those are great questions. So I've actually noted that I want to schedule early in the new year a Ask Me Anything session. We'll draw some people together so we can have some of those conversations. They're great questions. I just don't think we're teed up here to really address them. So we want to, Brett and Bob and I want to thank our guests here for this. We really appreciate your time and your insights. We want to thank all the attendees. So I want to point out, I'm pleased to note that, an hour and 5 minutes in, we're pretty much wrapped, but we've got over 50% of the people are still hanging in here. So, hopefully you all found some value in it. We're looking for feedback on this session. We're looking for ideas of what you want to hear and who you want to hear from on future sessions. We're going to continue to do these monthly as webinars going through next year, because we've just had a really good response. So thank you all for joining us, and please do not email or call Jake on the 23rd and ask him if he can get a gift drop shipped to you in time for Christmas. Unless, Jake, is that a new offering from you guys or no?
No, not quite yet.
You're not
quite.
doing same day delivery?
Not quite yet, no.
Okay.
But well, I mean, it depends on how close you are to the fulfillment centers, but yeah, not as a massive service quite yet. But
So the lesson is, if you haven't placed all your orders, do it now.
yes, I would highly encourage that.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much, and wishing you all a wonderful holiday season and a great start to 2023.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.